Welcome, game dev adventurers, to the Indie Game Lunch Hour. Today we're talking with Andrew Bernstein, the CEO and founder of Pocket Worlds, about the power of social elements in games.
The Indie Game Lunch Hour.
In our live magical podcast, we give game developers the chance to hear stories of breaking in from industry experts, as well as directly ask them questions about their areas of expertise in the second half of each episode. This is a mostly unedited recording of a weekly event we host in our Discord, so feel free to come and join us for the next one. There are links to join down below. As always, I'm your host, Willem Delventhal, the headmaster here at the Indie Game Academy, and joining me today is Anton Bernstein, the CEO and founder of Pocket Worlds. Anton is going to teach us a little bit about the power of social elements in video games. Anton, welcome to the show. Such a pleasure to have you. What are you having for lunch here today?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Well, it's not lunchtime quite yet for me, but I'm drinking a rooibos apple cider tea with pistachio milk. I have this great place like right next to our office that makes bomb teas.
Amazing. That means it's caffeine free as well, right?
Caffeine free. I'm a caffeine free person.
Wow.
It just kills me.
How does that, I don't really actually comprehend that. That's confusing to me.
Yeah. Well, just the problem with caffeine is I stay up it's like way too intense for me.
Hmm.
And also I once realized I drank caffeine in the morning almost every day. And then at one point I really realized the first hour I was like very anxious.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, why am I so anxious? And then I realized it was the caffeine.
Because I'm pounding cups of coffee every day. I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't make sense to me. Well, welcome to the show, Anton. I'm glad that you've got your rooibos tea there. I've got my coffee in a mug. Today we're talking about social games, which is definitely an interesting topic. It is one of the sort of one of the corners or pillars of game development in general, getting people to interact and engage. It is considered one of the three core motivators of human beings to interact, socialize. And yeah, it's definitely, of course, a huge part of game playing in general. Now, before we actually talk about building social interactions into your game, I'd love to hear your origin story, Anton. Tell us about where you are today and how you got there.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction. I'm Anton. So I live in Austin, Texas. Our company is called Pocket Worlds, and the main product we make is called Highrise, although we have another one also called Everskies. I have been doing this for about 11 years. So we started Pocket Worlds 11 years ago in San Francisco. Today, we have north of 50 million registered users on Highrise, and another like 5 million on Everskies. They're both very, very social platforms. I'll probably spend some time describing Highrise first. But the journey of our company was my co-founder Jimmy and I started the company 11 years ago in San Francisco. We started kind of with just an idea. And the idea was, how do you connect people through virtual experiences? Both of us grew up playing games. You know, we grew up playing everything, but a lot of Counter-Strike and Diablo and Warcraft and all those awesome games that were heavily multiplayer, and I always felt that the most social experiences that I'd ever had online were through games. They weren't what people, I guess at the time, so when we started in 2013, all social was like Facebook and Instagram was, had taken off, and these kind of like what people called social platforms, I always thought weren't all that social, in fact. And really the most social platform I'd ever played or experienced was, a game of Counter-Strike with friends on a mic'd up. And so we decided, hey, let's explore what's there. How can we really focus on that as a concept? What is at the intersection of social networking and gaming, and especially on a mobile phone, because the mobile phone is your identity device. It has your social network built in. You talk to people through it. And so we thought, hey, on mobile, how do you build really, really social games, essentially? Ultimately, our mission is to connect the world through shared experiences. That's what we're trying to do. So, yeah, I started a company before this that was pretty successful, and we sold it. And so we had the opportunity to bootstrap for 5 years. And so we spent 5 years just kind of building and iterating. We tested 4 different games that did not do well. We were kind of experimenting. Hey, how do we make really social games? We made like a social farming simulator. like basically an MMO farming simulator. We made more of a kind of a virtual world type game called Pockets. Ultimately, in 2016, we launched Highrise. And Highrise initially was basically a virtual world shell. So we have, a very rich avatar system, ways for people to hang out in rooms and talk to each other. And that was kind of it in 2016. And it really started to develop a following. And what we did over time and what we learned over time is that our community and the users of Highrise know best what Highrise wants and needs. And so we started to build more and more creator tools and UGC tooling. And so over the years, we've been building more and more creator tooling, UGC tooling, such that, fast forward to today, in March, we rolled out in public beta something we call Highrise Studio. Highrise Studio basically lets you build any game or any experience using our APIs, using our SDK. You do it inside of Unity, well, our version of Unity. You have to download something called Highrise Studio, which kind of manages it. And then you can one-click deploy it directly into Highrise, and then it's accessible across all our mobile, Highrise products as well as desktop. And then we also give tons of data, retention data, monetization data, all this kind of stuff. Because we realized, as we gave people better and better tooling to build the world that they want to see, they just continue to blow us away with what they were capable of, and also what they were capable of learning in the process. And so that's where we are today. We basically have two pillars. We have Highrise, which is the end user platform where we have 50 million registered users who are connecting with each other, playing games, socializing. And then on the other end, we have Highrise Studio, where we have at this point, I think it's like 4,000 plus creators who are building games and experiences and deploying them into Highrise. Still pretty early because we launched Studio in March, but it's been growing really quickly, and it's been really impressive to see what creators are capable of building.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really feel like UGC is experiencing its renaissance right now. We're seeing such an incredible amount of talent enter the game industry by building inside of other people's IPs, essentially. Roblox and Fortnite are probably the biggest, golden examples of that working, but we've seen it on all kinds of different levels. I was most recently working on a Sims competitor where their whole unique value prop was that they're giving heavier UGC tools than the Sims could ever offer. And so it's really fascinating to see this world, expand. And I think the most interesting quote that you just gave, in my opinion anyway, is the community knows best what this game should be. And so giving them the opportunity to turn this game into what they believe it should be, I think is really powerful and also unlocks so much for us game developers.
Totally.
So here's the question. The Highrise sounds super fascinating, and y'all go check it out. As always, with every episode, we will include pertinent links down below. So if you're listening to this after the fact, you can go and check out links in the description down below. Here is the link to pocketworlds.com for those in the Discord right now. But here's my question. So some of these people may well jump into Pocket Worlds and play with it, may jump into Highrise and play with it, but a lot of these people who are listening right now are indie developers working on their own IPs for the most part, making their own games. So if we sat them down and we did a 101 lecture on socializing your game, perhaps opening it up to UGC, whatever you believe is the best step, how would you introduce them to that? How would you recommend that they incorporate social elements into their own games?
Yeah, man, I mean, that's such a big question because it depends so much on the game and the context. I mean, I can share with Highrise, what we've really focused on is the connection. Like, the connection is core. And if you ask any player of Highrise who's played for longer than a month, why do you play Highrise? Every single person, or maybe 90% of people, will say because of the people I met on Highrise. And what we've done is we've really treated the world that we've built almost more as an app or a kind of a communications platform than a games platform. And the result has been that we've built a lot of features that focus very much on the social, where the social is really the reason why people are there. And so, we have a full messenger that's built literally just like Facebook Messenger, where people can asynchronously chat with each other. We have a news feed, kind of like Instagram, where people can post content, share content from inside and outside the world. We have voice chat inside of the environments, inside of the rooms. We have proximity chat. We have broadcasting chat. We also have voice chat inside of the messenger. We have a lot of kind of features that basically facilitate communication and chat, but that's because it's pretty core to what we do. I would say the range of social is so broad, because you can start with something as simple as, I turn on a bit and someone else in the world turns off the bit, or the light. And that can be a really deeply social interaction, or maybe not deeply, but it can be very social.
There's that website that's like, it's literally a million checkboxes and it's active at all time, and anybody in the world can turn them on and off, and that is the whole thing.
Totally. And it's like it feels social without being intimate. But then you can kind of like raise the intimacy by, say, incorporating voice chat, incorporating text chat, incorporating ways that people can communicate with each other. Guilds are a really great way to raise intimacy. Like, broadly speaking, the way that I think about games is they give context and purpose, over which you can connect with other people. And so, if I just if I just go to a public space and I'm like, hey, do you want to be friends? That's kind of weird. But if I join a dodgeball league, or if I join a soccer league or something like that, I will almost naturally and organically develop friendships and relationships with people who I'm playing with. So that's the approach that I take, which is you give people context and purpose. Within that context and purpose, you allow them to gather into groups in some form or compete with each other in some form. And then out of that form, friendships and relationships and connections. And then there's like kind of features and tools around all of that just make it easier to kind of sustain those relationships. Kind of a roundabout answer, but yeah, at least that's how I think about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you looking at games as essentially almost like an onboarding ramp to socialization, I think is really strong and pretty apt. That makes me immediately think of like the rise of the board game cafe and how ubiquitous almost board game cafes are in any kind of American town at this point in time. Because I think exactly that. It's not only a place to go and chill and relax, but it's also a place that has a directed task that makes it so much easier to socialize with other people. Because you have a rule set, you know exactly what to do. And then if you happen to talk about life on top of that, then great.
That actually brings up a good point, which is the distinction between meeting new people and socializing with the people you already know. And they really are pretty different. Like, for example, the board game experience. Typically, you're going in with a group of friends, people you already know, or people you might already know. It's rare that you're going to kind of meet someone new. Not crazy rare, because maybe like a friend invites another friend, and that's how you bridge the gap. And then there's experiences where you meet totally new people. Again, that would be like a dodgeball league. You're probably going to meet a bunch of random strangers because you get put into a team, and then you meet these people. And so that range is really interesting. And if you look at Highrise, a lot of it is about meeting new people. If you look at, a Roblox, for example, it's probably more heavily people who already know each other playing together, especially when they're kind of younger. So our average age is 20. So our average age is older. So that's kind of a big difference. But yeah, that's kind of an interesting area to explore in your game as you're building your game. Is this a game intended to play with my existing network? In which case you design a certain set of features, or is it a game where, hey, I should be able to come in and actually like connect with some random people, join a pod or be competitive against a bunch of random people. And that has a different set of social features.
Yeah. Interesting. So here's a maybe big open question for you. Another very broad one. Do social elements belong in every video game?
No, I mean, definitely not.
Okay.
I think there are excellent single player experiences in games.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, case in point, probably one of my favorite games is like Undertale.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a journey. That's a kind of a solo journey. Um, no, I think social can can have negative consequences too. Like it can really affect the game experience depending on the level of social. But actually, when we built the farming simulator, the farming sim MMO, that was actually a good example where social in that world needs to be super light
Mm-hmm.
because we had like literally someone could walk into your farm and just start like cursing you out and doing whatever they wanted to do in your basically in your like Zen garden that was you were growing because it made you feel good and peaceful, and then someone comes in and just wrecks it um, by shouting or doing whatever. So I think social is kind of it can throw a wrench into the game experience, especially if the game experience is meant to have some sort of solo or narrative play. Um, so no, I don't think it belongs in every game.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there are many games that benefit from it in some form. You know, take
Yeah.
like Animal Crossing as an example. You know, Animal Crossing is a heavily solo single player experience because you know you're meeting these NPCs and you're gardening and you're growing stuff. But then the way that they layered in social was delicate and it was like very controlled. And I think that allowed the experience, the core experience of Animal Crossing, which is a Zen kind of meditative experience,
Mm-hmm.
to stay that way, while having light, kind of more fun, controlled social by sending letters or, you know, asynchronously visiting someone's town, like that kind of thing. Um, but if they amped it up and it was like all of a sudden everyone's hanging out in this common square,
Mm-hmm.
um, it would, I think it would actually uh, negatively affect some of the core value of Animal Crossing, like the
Mm-hmm.
Zen meditative experience of it.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. It's definitely an interesting sort of balance. Like there's a couple examples that you've made me think of here. Like Wordle is a great example. It's a single player game, but it winds up being social simply because of that share mechanic that got so
Mm,
popular for a while. Being able to show how well you did, and that sort of naturally independent of the game, outside of the game experience, created social engagement. Or I'm thinking of just like Skyrim. Skyrim is very much single player, but it's a social phenomenon, sort of even in and of itself, especially because of its such a heavy modding community and modding scene. And so there winds up being community that surrounds it, even though the game itself is single player with no actual, social elements, social mechanics. Um,
totally. Minecraft was kind of like that.
yeah.
I mean, Microsoft has been building more and more social and, you know, private servers and all that kind of stuff, but kind of originally, you know, it kind of grew on YouTube and um, people building really cool stuff and sharing videos of that.
Yeah.
Uh,
Sense of like ownership and yeah, like building together a little shared adult Lego box. It's what I always saw Minecraft as at the beginning. All right, how about this? So I'm trying to get, as always, I'm for the indie, so I'm trying to give indies some tools here. What are some of the like let's say we've got a periodic table of social. What are some of the really easy, low-hanging fruit ways? Maybe like a Wordle sharing device or something like that. Some of those easy, low-hanging fruit mechanics or implementations that we can add to our own games to crank up that social at least a little bit.
yeah. Well, one, as you mentioned, is just um, identifying those kind of shareable moments.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Wordle, as you mentioned, does a really good job of this, and the way that they visualize it so that people can kind of see your thought process.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you remember Draw Something. It was a kind of a big phenomenon.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a company called OMG Pop that was like kind of on its last legs, and then they released Draw Something and then Zynga bought them. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, they did this amazing thing where so Draw Something is basically you have a prompt and then you have to draw it, and then the other person has to guess what you drew.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so
Game of telephone kind of thing.
yeah, kind of, yeah. But the interesting mechanic that they implemented, kind of like Wordle with its screenshot, was they actually screen capped the drawing of the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would send the whole video of the person drawing as opposed to just the finished product.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just such a more social interaction because you're looking into someone's brain as they're trying to figure out, how do I draw a cat or whatever. It also makes the game a little more fun because you can time the guess, like
Mm-hmm.
how soon can someone guess. But there's moments like that, which is, thinking about what is the shareable moment? What is that thing that's going to be interesting to someone else in the context of the gameplay?
Mm-hmm.
Minecraft, again, the whole process of building became a really, really engaging and interesting thing, or seeing, navigating and flying through the final product.
Mm-hmm.
I really like the draw something example. I really like the Wordle example. So I think all of those are really, really interesting. For us, so much of it is about people meeting each other, and so we have like really heavy messaging. I mean, people literally are messaging each other. I mean, literally everything, but like screenshots from the game and like whatever it might be. Connection. In my experience, I think that unless a game is designed for that and really built for that, I would actually discourage people from going in that direction. Generally speaking, because it ends up becoming the core. Like for us, it's so much the core.
Mm-hmm.
People messaging with each other, talking with each other, going over voice chat. So I would be just, for indie game devs, I would just be cautious about adding those things and making sure that they're really adding value to the game and they're not just bolted on social.
Mm-hmm.
Because it can really detract from the core game experience, is kind of what I've seen.
Yeah.
And so the reason why this is such a hard thing to answer, why there's no like boilerplate, just like add this social component,
Mm-hmm.
is because so much of it depends on the gameplay. If you're building Cards Against Humanity or something like that, of course, it's deeply communicative, deeply social, or like Jackbox party games or something like that. But if you're building, I don't know, a puzzle game, then, as we mentioned, what you want to do is capture like what is the most interesting component that's shareable, that is kind of like a view into the user's mind, or, a way to share like an accomplishment that other people can appreciate, kind of like Wordle.
Mm-hmm.
Then kind of you want to capture that. And so it's very different kind of features and mechanics that you want to implement depending on the gameplay. It's so gameplay dependent.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a ton of sense. There's with any feature in a game, you're balancing a couple of different things. You're balancing, of course, just like scope. Is this worth putting in the effort? I think, by the way, I would echo the don't just slap chat in your game sentiment, because I've worked on chat systems that didn't belong and it was a lot of work for not a lot of payoff. And then I think like it is also coming down to what is the core theme or gameplay pillars for your game. And if they don't involve social, I think trying to think about what is the shareable moment in your game is really smart. But a theme I'm getting from you is basically like, don't force it in. It doesn't belong in every game. Yeah.
Yeah, it does not. I would definitely not force it. And I think it just has to be thought of as part of the game. Like if the game is multiplayer, if the game is social, then you will build those social loops. And then you can build features around that, whether that's voice chat or text chat or anything like that. Or, sharing or feeds or whatever. But if it doesn't, if you're not feeling like it's baked into the game mechanics, then it's not going to feel right. It's just going to feel broken or bolted on.
Yeah, any kind of design that's forced feels forced. So be cautious about that. I think, all right, so from what you've told me so far, I think I've got like three, I don't know what I would call them, three social balance points. It is raising versus lowering intimacy, new people versus existing friends, and then collaboration versus competition. So balancing those elements when you're building out a social aspect to your game, seems like a part of what you're talking about. Would you agree with those? And then do you have anything else you would add to those?
Totally. Yeah, I totally agree with those. I think they are a pretty good summary. One thought I was having, by the way, that is kind of tangentially related, but not necessarily on point with what you're like directly on the point of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is cosmetics.
Hmm.
So Highrise is a major cosmetics economy. So there's kind of a second component around, or I guess a fourth component maybe around multiplayer,
Hmm.
which is economy. I
Hmm.
think economies can be fundamentally multiplayer,
Hmm.
or obviously there are single player economies with single player games,
Hmm.
but I think they get a lot more interesting and much more dynamic when they're multiplayer.
Hmm.
Um,
And difficult to
and
balance.
very difficult to balance. And so
Yeah.
Highrise has a very active, very large secondary market. We do over 100 million in transaction volume
Wow.
a year in our secondary market. Well, secondary plus primary. Um, and I think that is a really, if done well, really powerful and interesting social mechanic. Because a lot of it is about what has value, why does it have value, people decide it. It's all based on scarcity, and based on like the narratives and stories that people create around the items and the content. Imagine CS:GO, with knives and CS:GO and why they have that lore and why people want them. Um, but I think that is a really interesting social, um, kind of like social touch point,
Hmm.
the secondary market and the marketplace. And just one thing that I've seen people try to do is they try to sell or release cosmetics inside of their
Hmm.
games, but they don't have social, or they don't have kind of the social dynamic of like, you're playing Fortnite, you die and you see someone else's skin for like 20 minutes as you watch them kill everybody.
Hmm.
Um, they don't have that, but they try to layer in cosmetics as a way to monetize their games. I would definitely discourage people from layering in cosmetics if you don't have strong social and strong multiplayer. It
Hmm.
just won't be that interesting or that compelling to players. Um, I mean, some limited degree, but for the most part, you're not going to get a lot of deep engagement or deep spend. And
Hmm.
then, yeah, that marketplace itself, if there is one, um, is a really interesting social loop in and of itself. I mean, even without a marketplace, like a Fortnite, for example,
Hmm.
there are cosmetics that you might have from like 3 seasons ago that other people see and they admire and they're impressed by. And that is another social interaction that's very kind of like status oriented, um, self-expression oriented. But yeah,
Hmm.
that's kind of another interesting dimension to explore.
Yeah, there's obviously a sense of self-expression in single player games. Like in Skyrim, I hate that the best piece of armor is the Dragonbone armor because I think it kind of looks dumb versus some of the other armor is way cooler. So there is obviously an effect of value to cosmetics in a single player game, but I think you're absolutely right that there's a lot more in a multiplayer game. There's an old motivational framework called the Octalysis framework that I still really like looking at now and then by a guy named Yukai Chao. And it's basically sort of the 8 key motivators for a game player. And he mentions both social pressure and ownership on that list. And I think cosmetics in a multiplayer game hit both of those really, really hard. Ownership, of course, is sense of self-expression. Look at how cool I look. Isn't my knife awesome? And then social pressure is also kind of maybe like what gets you through the gateway into that. Like, oh man, that guy has such a cool knife. I wish I had a cool knife. And
Hmm.
that's something that you strictly don't get in a single player game.
Well, and the craziest thing in a multiplayer game is, so in a single player game, like the vector is this is cool or this is powerful. I mean, if something has power, then all of a sudden, kind of like,
Hmm.
okay, there's no longer cosmetics. That's not a cosmetic anymore. It's a
Yeah.
powerful weapon. It's like Diablo, it's like everything's just you want the best thing.
Yeah.
How it looks is very secondary, if not tertiary.
Yeah.
Um, but in a multiplayer setting and in a marketplace setting, um, I think what is interesting about that is that you have the vector of this looks cool, which like yeah maybe, but then there's another vector which is this is scarce or this is rare, and people don't have it or can't have it, and
Mhm.
that creates its value, and it's like totally separate to it looking cool. Like all the time I see in high rise, there are things that just have lore and have narrative and have value. And like visually, they're like the plainest, most simple thing you'll ever see. In some other game, it would be like a starter beginner item. But in our world, because it's very rare and people have given it this kind of allure because it's this massively multiplayer place, now it has value. And that doesn't really happen in a single player experience, but it very much happens in this like multiplayer world experience.
Yeah, that value of scarcity, it is valuable simply because there's not that many of it. Love that. All right, it is time for community questions. I've stolen enough of your time here, Anton. And we've got a couple people who've got some questions for you. Luis is the first person on stage. Luis, would you like to ask your first question?
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Anton, for doing this, and happy Wednesday, everyone.
Happy Wednesday.
You kind of touched on a little bit of my original question in terms of making sure you've got social elements that make sense for the type of game you're making, right? You can't just shoehorn in everything. So I'll kind of reword my question. How in these instances do you or techniques you've in your experience that you've found to help make it a safe space? Or do you feel that's how much focus do you put on that? Do you make the platform and hope it all goes well? Just how do you balance all that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I can speak for myself, and then maybe like advice for more of an indie dev. So for us, we've gotten certainly to the scale where trust and safety and protection is super, super important. So our company, we're about 120 people. About 30 of those are in trust and safety and support. So we have a big trust and safety team and organization. We also use technology, both for voice and text. So for text, we use a text moderation system that uses a combination of NLP and AI. It's called Community Sift. It's actually owned by Microsoft now. For voice, we have voice moderation. We're actually testing a couple of voice moderation solutions today, but we also, if anybody reports something that happens in a room, we send a snippet of that audio to our servers, and then our trust and safety team actually listens to the audio and sees, hey, what happened here? We also have like very robust reporting systems. So if you see a piece of content or a user or a world or anything that you think is inappropriate, people can report it. And then we have like a full robust reporting system in-house where our TNS team goes in and reviews all those reports. And then finally, we have a lot of age-related stuff. So we have like age verification. If we have any suspicion that you might be underage, then you actually get immediately suspended. And then we pop a whole thing where you have to do identity verification. All of that is to say, it's like super important to us because we are so heavily leaning into social, and we've reached a scale where that matters. I would say for an indie dev, if you're just kind of starting out, I personally think that's overkill. If you're just starting out, I would encourage you to definitely monitor as much as you can. Definitely start with some level of reporting. A reporting system is super important so that the community can self-moderate. Definitely. Oh, we also have a blocking system, so someone can block someone else, and then they don't see anything that they do. So blocking is really effective. And then something like a community sift, there's lots of competitors out there now. You can bake that in pretty quickly. So if you have any kind of text chat across any language, you can bake in a technology like this that can basically, it tracks all of the text that's being sent. It even understands context. You can define different kind of parameters on how much you want to filter or how much you want to surface, and then you can act accordingly. So these are all tools that you kind of have at your disposal that you could build in. I will say, like, get the game right, ship it, get some users before doing maybe not any of it. Like, probably set up reporting and blocking. If you have like truly deep social, like someone can message someone else directly through a DM or something like that. But then I wouldn't go further beyond that if you're just starting, because you don't even know if you'll have users, and you don't want to put the cart before the horse. You can always slow things down and then put in the right kind of technology and tooling to protect the community.
Yeah, I'm hearing if you wanna have social aspects, make sure you've got all your tools set up. Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, in particular the voice clip is really clever, I think, and it's not something I've run into myself before. I will
There's
actually,
also
yeah.
oh, I was just gonna say like we're exploring there's Talks Mod,
Hmm.
and then there's Modulate. Um, there's a couple of new ones coming out too, and they actually real time assess what people are saying
Hmm.
via voice, and then
Hmm.
flag it if there are issues. So
That's
it's
super
going
cool.
well. Mhm.
Yeah, it's honestly really impressive, and it's not something I hear very typically. That out of 120 people at the company, 40-ish of them are dedicated to safety and customer communication. That's quite unusual, and I think shows that your team and your company is putting in a really good faith effort, really serious effort, even to make sure that it's a safe and inclusive space. That's awesome. Commend you for that.
Thank you. Yeah, super important to us.
Yeah. And I want to actually correct you a little bit, Luis. I think that was a great question. But from what I heard, Anton, you are not suggesting that you put everything in place ahead of time. You're suggesting have a couple of the sort of rote or most important tools in place. It sounds like to me the two things are reporting and a blocking system. But then you understand that probably you're going to grow slowly. And so you deliberately don't try to build everything perfectly at the beginning because, if you have 3 people playing your game and you've spent months working on a flagging system, then it's just wasting a lot of scope.
Yeah, I mean, my general philosophy, even like just in terms of development philosophy, even at our scale,
Hmm.
is shipping is the most important thing,
Yes.
and perfection is a disease.
Yeah.
I think there are people who can do it. Like you have like a Stardew Valley where someone has spent 5 years perfecting their product and shipped what they deem to be a perfect product. But
Hmm.
those are very much the exception, not the rule. And I very much encourage people to just like kill their ego, kill their notion of perfection, and just ship as quickly as possible.
I love that. I've said this before to some of my students, but my mom actually was a theater professor for a very long time. She's retired now, but one of her favorite quotes to her students was "Done is beautiful," with
That is
exactly,
beautiful. I love that.
yeah, with the exact same sentiment. Stop trying to make it perfect. Just be done. Just finish. Ship
Totally.
the damn thing. Yeah, love it.
Yeah.
All right, I'm calling Misha up on stage. Misha, would you like to ask the next community question?
Sure. Can you hear me, guys?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. So I know part of that was pre-answered, of course, but the other secondary part to that was about like I guess like multiplayers where it's like there's gender parity and um maybe certain players may have more of a connotation to want to like determine, okay, is this player male or female, can I flirt with them or not, that kind of stuff. But like even then it's like, obviously now with LGBTQ becoming more common in certain communities too, and I'm sure you've also experienced just knowing like certain games and with certain niches may have certain player bases, how you see that kind of also engagement kind of evolving and like basically having ways of instilling, positive reinforced socialization through these things where people can just be kind of, less judgmental of who that person is and more of accepting of who they might be in the game, right? And knowing that, okay, let's put our, but that's where, as I said, it feels like there can be conflictions between like when it comes to socializing. It's like, if you're a human and you have a life outside of games, how much of that do you bring in to the game versus become like an alias of some other character because you want to fantasize about being something that you're not? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah. I think I have some. Let me try to answer the question in the things that it kind of brought up in me or that I was kind of thinking about as you were asking it. So, um, one, this is kind of what I was saying about social can be also very damaging to
Mm-hmm.
your product and community. People are people, and like you said, they have stuff going outside in the outside world, and they might bring that into the game and into the product if there's a lot of social tools and ways to like vent to other people. Uh, I sometimes joke that like drama is literally a feature of Highrise. Like this is just what happens. It is the way people vent. It is the way people get like actually a lot of joy and engagement, and they're very social in this way. But like, yes, I mean if you're deep into the Highrise kind of community, you're exposed to drama. It just happens. People might bully each other. They might not understand each other. They might, be culturally very different. So Highrise it's all over the world, and we actually have quite a big presence in the Middle East, and Eastern Europe. And we're also a very LGBTQ friendly platform. And that can sometimes be in conflict. We can like see some people sharing inappropriate stuff, or telling us kind of like frustrated or inappropriate stuff, maybe because their culture is clashing with the culture of our community or the culture of our platform. So all of that exists. All of that is difficult and complicated. There's not a perfect answer. I would say, starting with this tooling of being able to block each other, probably the first step always. It's like, have you guys blocked each other? Like, two people who are fighting, have you blocked each other? There's matchmaking solutions that, many companies have explored and experimented with, around, like an Overwatch, like a lot of the first person shooters. We're not a first person shooter, so we don't have this as much, but there's so much toxic behavior happening in first person shooters because it's literally an outlet for violence. And so a lot of companies have set up more effective matchmaking systems where like if you block someone or report someone, then like they have recommendation systems that make sure that that person doesn't get matched with someone else who is like blocked or reported similarly, blah, 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 like that whole thing. All that is to say, it's like a big nebulous problem because people are people, and as you add more social, people will be kind of like mean to each other, or they won't understand each other and they won't be able to communicate with each other. We try to arbitrate sometimes if we have the time, and if it's like someone who's a really engaged community member, they might get into a fight. We might try to kind of tone it down, say, hey, like block each other, or maybe like don't talk to each other for a while. We might suspend someone for a week because we're like, hey, we need you to tone it down for a while, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a really thorny, difficult problem in any community. I mean, including like Twitter and Reddit and all these other places. Yeah.
Yeah, it's some of what you say is really interesting here. I think it's funny that a lot of the questions here are about essentially community moderation, and that makes sense. It's a huge aspect of any social experience. We run team-based boot camps here. That's essentially what we do. We put people on teams. They run in their own little indie studio. They release games. I swear to God, half of what we do is exactly this, is managing the drama. And funnily enough, you said drama is almost a feature. It's something that we try to prime the community with, that when you have conflict with your essentially little indie team, that's good, because that's actually experience for real life. You're not going to agree with everybody you work with, and being able to work together despite not agreeing is very important.
Totally. Yeah, and actually, for a lot of our audience is teenage or like older teenage, and they're learning how to deal with conflict through a space that is safe, where like nobody's going to punch you in the face, And in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad, obviously. Yeah. But yeah, it's pretty good. There's one there I've seen some apps that do this that I think is awesome. We don't do it, but I think it's a really fun idea. Where if somebody gets banned for inappropriate behavior, they actually get dumped into hell, and then they're just with everyone else who's banned. And so they don't come back like with some sort of alt account. They just hang out in hell with all these other people who are like equally,
kind of awful. But maybe that all works. Yeah,
exactly,
everybody's awful together and they love it. That's honestly a brilliant idea. All right, I think we probably have one more question for today. I'm going to ask it for Haley. Haley doesn't have a mic. Haley says, what happens if a social element you're trying to make ends up being a complete 180 from the original design? For example, League's social elements are known for being quite toxic. How can one, for their game community, help mitigate things like that? I think I would interpret this as like, all right, your community became toxic. What now?
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of things that theoretically can be done. I've talked about with League. I think they've put a lot of effort and energy into matchmaking and into making matchmaking better, into adding reporting. You know, you can always like at the end of a match rate somebody. You know, rating systems are always interesting, and karma systems where people like earn karma for being good, essentially. Because there's two sides of trust and safety, right? Like, there's the one side which is punishing the bad. There's another side though that's also encouraging the good. And very often, I think trust and safety teams and systems are really focused on punishing the bad, but they're not really thinking that much about how to encourage the good. I don't know if everybody here has played Sky, but Sky has done like an awesome job of encouraging good pro-social behavior. They like you gift candles to other people. It's also just a beautiful game and like really serene. And I encourage folks to check it out. It's really, really cool. But yeah, I think there's a lot that can be done there. On the topic of like things taking a 180 from what you expected as a game designer, my advice is always just roll with it. I'm not saying like the toxic part, but although maybe there's a way to roll with the toxic part, right?
I mean,
like,
the hell example is it. Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah.
But in general, I'm like, look, the world and the universe is telling you something. So, you know, maybe you were holding on too tightly to this thing that you really had a vision for and that you wanted, but actually the world wants something else. And, you know, ultimately, why are you here? To like exercise and execute your vision, or to provide like a service to the world and to provide value to the world? And if you decide you want to provide value and service to the world, then maybe roll with it and see where it goes, as opposed to like holding on so tightly to the thing that you really wanted to. I don't know. You really wanted it to look this way.
Yeah, I'm finger clicking in the background. Listeners can't see me doing this. But yeah, as a designer and as somebody who works with a lot of junior designers, I love that as an answer. If your audience is getting toxic as heck, I mean, maybe this is a different answer for specifically toxicity, but at the very least, if your design winds up going a different way than you expected, leaning into it is really what you should be doing. Because at the end of the day, you're not designing a specific game. You're not designing a game for yourself. You're designing a game for people, for players. And if players want something a different way than you expected, then that's them telling you that they want it a different way than you expected. And so you should listen. And in general, that's a good thing. Awesome. I also just wanted to mention I am a big fan, as much as possible, of the positive reinforcement rather than the negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement is important, but I worked at InView for a while at Together Labs, and they had a really simple system called a karma coin, which was a currency that you earned over time. You have a certain cap of it. I think we had you could only have 5 karma coins to give out or something like that. And you would earn one every period of time, every 2-3 weeks or something like that. And the only thing you can do with this coin is give it to other people. And the only thing that it does once you receive it is it's special. You know, you have karma. Look at you. People like you. And that simple mechanic actually was a huge part of what got repeated often when we asked what people liked about our space. Just being able to say, oh, we called it a kudos coin. That's what it was. But internally we referred to it as karma. So yeah, being able to just say look at how much kudos this person has. They're clearly a really great member of the community. They clearly do wonderful things and help people out. So, you know, we saw user behavior drive by that of like people hanging out in the newbie area, like the tutorial area, and like helping other new players just so that they could try to get the kudos coins that don't do anything, right? Like, you know, that positive reinforcement, that recognition of people being acting the right way, what we hope them to be, I think is really powerful.
Totally. I agree.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So we're pretty much at the end of the episode. Now, before we say goodbye, Anton, we like to do 2 things here. And the first one is homework. So what is a homework assignment we can give to the audience that they can do in the next week that'll take them about an hour to practice some of what we talked about here today?
Good question. Well, one thing I always encourage any creative person to do is ship really, really fast. So build something in an hour and get it in front of people, no matter what it looks like. time box it to 1 hour. So like,
Love it.
say you want to implement some sort of like social mechanic that's really like embedded into your game design. Time box it to 1 hour, get it done and implemented, and then show somebody, show 5 people, and then listen to them without trying to convince them that this is the right thing. Just like listen, and then it's fine. Like whether they love it or hate it doesn't really matter. It's just feedback and input to your decision making, and then use that data to be like, oh, do I want to change this? Do I like it? Do I not like it? Like that, you're still fully in control. I think I find a lot of people, creative people especially, who like it's hard not to be creative without an ego, because you got to care, and caring is kind of like your ego, being like, I care a lot about this thing. But I think the thing to remember is that you're always in control. So even if somebody's giving you feedback and that feedback is negative, or you already know it, or whatever, you're still always in control. And it doesn't really, you don't have to fight it, or say like, I already know, or whatever. You're in control of all of the decisions. So just listen, and that's it. Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. A metaphor that I've always really liked is a stone carving metaphor. When you start carving a stone, some people who carve stone like to say that you don't actually know what the sculpture is. The stone knows what it wants to be. And the reason they mention that is you might be carving and a big chunk flies off that you don't intend. And so that sort of modifies the stone. And then some other part of the stone will be really hard. You can't get through it. So that winds up being a different element of the final statue. You need to have enough ego to say, I'm going to make a cool thing out of this stone, but you need to have little enough ego that it can kind of be whatever the hell it's going to be. Right. I think, yeah, game design is the same deal, 100%. So I love that as homework. I'm going to modify it very slightly. Tell me if you like this. In the next week, we want you to create specifically a social mechanic, a prototype that is playable and somehow social, somehow involves socializing or multiple players. And then we want you to play it with at least one person and tell you how it changes. How's that sound?
Sounds great. Love it.
Sweet. Awesome. And if you're at a loss for that, paper prototype that sucker. It can just be a game where you roll dice and the other player tells you what they think you're going to roll. That would satisfy the requirements and would take you 5 minutes to make. Once you do that, we want you to post it on LinkedIn. You can tag Anton as well as myself. We'll have links down below, as well as the Indie Game Academy, and we'll tell you cool things and tell you you're awesome and all that good stuff. All right, that is going to do it. Anton, before we say goodbye, any last words of wisdom you'd like to give or anything you'd like to plug here at the end of the episode?
Yeah, well, thank you everyone who joined in the audience and everyone who's going to be listening in the future. To plug, I'll plug Highrise. I'd love for you guys to go check out Highrise, especially Highrise Studio for the builders in the audience. I mean, I can go on a whole other topic around using something like Highrise. It could be Highrise, could be Roblox, could be Epic, whatever. But using something like that to MVP your stuff is just so much faster. And you don't have to think about marketing and distribution and tooling, and multiplayer, and all this other stuff. So I would really encourage folks to prototype. Obviously, I'm going to plug our platform, but any platform like that. And then learn from that, iterate really, really fast. And then, like Lethal Company did, then go eventually ship to Steam once you've kind of cut your teeth, building really quickly in a platform like ours.
Do I not know this? Did Lethal Company get prototyped in something else?
Lethal Company, the developer, is a Roblox dev. So he'd been a Roblox dev for years, and this was his first commercial Steam product.
Did he prototype it in Roblox, or that's just kind of where he cut his teeth?
I'm not really sure if he prototyped it. I think there was a version of it. Not quite Lethal Company. I mean, Lethal Company is something, but I think there was a variation of it that he built in Roblox. Don't quote me on that. I'm not 100% certain. But I know he was a Roblox dev for many years, and that's where he learned how to basically do live ops, build a great game, and even market it. Yeah. I mean, I love Lethal Company as an example. One developer in 6 months, and it's now made over $100 million. Like, that is bonkers. All right. Incredible. Absolutely. Truly. All right. So check out some of the links. We're going to drop Anton's links down below. Go check out Highrise. Go check out some of the other things that we link to. And of course, do your homework. Make us a social game element. Thank you, Anton Bernstein, for being here today.
Thank you for those who asked questions, and thank you, listeners, for listening. As always, we ask that you send this along to just one other person who you believe might enjoy this episode too. Anton, thanks for being here, man.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. All right, we'll see everybody again next week, Wednesday at 12 p.m. There's links to join down below. Goodbye, y'all.
Bye, guys.